Hello, welcome. Happy Wednesday for you. And as Novala pointed out, happy autumn. Thanks, Novala. I love autumn. So it's probably my favorite time of the year. So I'm very excited. It is autumn time and we're getting into, late September and early October, which is wonderful. So very happy about time of the year. Also, it's going to be cooling down a little bit, which is wonderful in San Diego. Although October usually is bad because it gets very windy and Santa Ana-y, and that's when the fires can break out, which is terrible. So I don't look forward to that part, but everything else I really like. So hey, Novala, thanks for joining us. Hey, JC, thanks for stopping by. I have had a busy day, so I haven't prepared anything really to talk about or to share with you, but I thought I would do something kind of fun and do a little breakdown of kind of not all, but a lot of the different paint pouring techniques and kind of where they all fit in. So I thought that might be kind of fun. I'm going to have like a big chart. So we'll write them out and see what I missed and see what I mess up. So, but if you have any questions, I will also be answering any questions you might have. So please throw them in the comments if you have any. So, but that's about it. I was doing a lot of work stuff today. I was doing a lot of filming for something very special coming up, which is going to be revealed next Thursday. Not this Thursday, but next Thursday. I'll reveal it. And evening, how are you, Facebook user? I'd love to see who you are. If you would click on that little StreamYard link in the above the video. It will be able to show you who's talking to me on Facebook. Otherwise, you have to give StreamYard permission to show who you are. Otherwise, Facebook doesn't like that one little bit. So, but I have my friends from YouTube and also from Facebook. So everyone's welcome. Glad to see you here. And so let's talk about techniques a little bit. There are so many acrylic pouring techniques out there. It's kind of overwhelming. And if you're brand new to pouring, it can be really confusing. So I'm going to just kind of chat. Nope, I still don't see you, Facebook user. Sorry. You have to, if you click that link, that StreamYard link, it'll take you to a little thing where you can agree to let StreamYard show your name. So hopefully that'll work for you. It can be a little kind of funny sometimes, so don't feel bad if it doesn't work. But anyway, back to techniques. If you're just getting into paint pouring, you'll see all of these different words, all of these different terms. It can be very confusing. There's all these different types of ring pours or kiss pours or waterfall pours or all these different things. So Dutch pours. Donna, hey, I can see you. Thanks for joining. And so anyway, I thought I'd do like a little chart kind of to break down a lot of these different pouring techniques and where they all kind of fit. So I thought that might be interesting. You might be interested in it. So I'll talk about it and then I'll switch over and I'll kind of start writing. Or maybe I'll start writing as I talk and then I'll show you what I'm coming up with. So, but I think the biggest confusion, I think, lies when we have something called a flip cup, which is we layer a bunch of paints in a cup, then we flip it on a canvas or some kind of surface, and then pull the cup away. And then we have this thing called dirty pour or a dirty cup. And you're like, well, what's the difference? What's a flip cup? What's a dirty cup? And what's a dirty pour? They're all pretty much the same type of thing. A dirty cup is anytime you just layer your paints in one cup is known as a dirty cup. So basically any kind of flip cup is a dirty cup in essence. A dirty pour is where you layer all your paints in a cup and you just dump it on the canvas. You just pour it on there. So you don't flip it over, you just kind of pour. So it's that's almost like a straight pour or a direct pour right on your canvas. That's a dirty pour. A direct pour is where we have different colors in different cups, and we pour those on the canvas. I demonstrated that technique a little while ago. So that's there's all these little subtle differences, and there's no one, perfect definition for all these things. Everyone kind of has their own little spin on it, which is fine. I have my own kind of spin on things. But so these are all little different nuances about acrylic pouring. But that it can get confusing if you're brand new to it. So I never really refer to anything as a dirty cup. I just called it a layered cup. So I leave the dirty part out. It's just a layered cup. And then you can do a flip cup with that. We could do a ring pour with that layered cup. We can do all kinds of things. So that's a kind of the difference between like a dirty cup or a layered cup. And I'm just okay. Jan's commenting. So I'll check the comments every now and then. So if I'm looking over here, that's what I'm doing. I'm not staring into blankness. So I'm staring at my monitor. But Jan says, my mother and I are sitting here watching. I'm trying to get her interested in painting. Well, this might be kind of confusing for your mom, but if you come back Friday, I'll be doing some actual painting. So I think she'll really enjoy that, hopefully. And then Novala says, so when you carefully layer, then when you pour it, so the paints sink, what are these called? Well, I have a couple different ways of layering my cup. One I call a floating layer. And so that is, I'm holding my hands up all crazy, but I kind of pour the paint down one side of the cup, so it kind of floats on the previous layer of paint. And then I have a high pour, which I call a high pour. So I pour the paint in high above the cup, and that shoots into the cup, and that causes a lot of blending and like mixing of the paints. And there's no rhyme or reason. You can mix these together. I often do floating layers and high pour together. You could do all floating layers. You could do all high pour, and you get a ton of blending. So those are what I call them. I'm sure other people have different terms for them. But does that answer your question, Navala? I hope so, because I call it a floating layer, and then I call it a high pour. So, and then also, you could do either one of those. You could do, or a combination of them. You could do all layered, like a floating layers, and layer your cup. Then you could take a popsicle stick or a stir stick, and then go in and swirl that around in your cup. That will cause blending in your cup as well. So there are a lot of different ways to do things. But hopefully that kind of answers the question. JC says, it confuses me when you do that. Well, I'm sorry. So yeah, but I do multiple types of layering. If you want to keep your colors, this is the rule of thumb. If you want to keep your colors more separated as you're pouring them on the canvas, like for a ring pour, I would stick with just floating layers of paint. If you want to have more blending and mixing of the colors, like let's say in a floating cup pour or an open cup pour, something like that, you can do more high pours, and that'll cause way more mixing as you pour your paint out. So I hope that kind of helps. But experiment with both. There's no one right way to do anything. I like to always kind of experiment and change things up and see what happens. So, so I'm checking here. Sheila says, how do you get cells? I've tried Floetrol. What happens when you use too much Floetrol? Well, that's a good question, Sheila. There's a couple of questions in there. I always get cells with Floetrol. But there's a trick to getting cells with Floetrol. You have to use the right amount of Floetrol, and then you have to use and get your paints to the proper consistency. So there's a couple different things going on there. So a good ratio to use would be 2 parts Floetrol, 1 part paint. So you've got your Floetrol now in your paint. So you have more Floetrol, double the Floetrol than your paint. But then now we need to get that Floetrol paint mixture to the proper consistency. In order to do that, we fine tune that mixture with water. So you add water. There's no one amount of water because different paints and brands and colors all are thicker or thinner depending on what color it is, what brand. It varies. So the amount of water is always going to be different. Not always different, but most of the time different. I usually always add a little bit of water, though, with my paint and Floetrol mixture. But the consistency is really the key. You want your paints to all be the same consistency. And that consistency is, you want a slight mound when you drizzle the paint off of your stir stick back into the cup. And you want that you don't want to lift your stick way up high to drizzle it in there. You want to lift it just an inch above your cup, let it drizzle in, and you're looking for a slight mound. So that's the consistency you want. And that's for kind of my standard types of pours. So that would be for flip cups. That would be for ring pours. That would be for swipes, certain types of swipes. That would be for string pulls. That would be for direct pours. So there are a batch of techniques that I would use that consistency for. Now, if you want to use that, if you want to do techniques like the Dutch pour, that's a totally different consistency. And that's, something completely different. We need much thinner paints for that type of technique. So there's a lot happening. There's no one proper ratio and consistency for every technique. They're all a little bit different. Not all of them, but there's a group of them that use the same consistency. Then there's a group of them that use a different, much thinner consistency. And then there's another group of them that's even a thinner consistency. So there are multiple things going on. But if you use that ratio, 2-to-1 Floetrol to paint, use a little water to get your paints to the same consistency and have that slight mound, I think you'll find that you'll be getting a lot of cells. So all the paintings behind me are created with basically that exact same ratio, and I get lots of cells from that mixture. So, but that's a great question. And this is confusing stuff. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of different techniques and a lot of confusion out there, and conflicting information also. So I'm going to just check here, and Navala also says silicone equals cells. Yes, you can get cells with silicone. That is one way to do it. I don't love that way, except if I'm using specific techniques like the swipe, I will use silicone, or I'm using a glue-based medium. I love the kind of cells I get with that recipe or that mixture. And the cells are beautiful with silicone in that one. So silicone also can help create cells. Absolutely. And JC says, the awful Dutch pour. Oh, Dutch pour is it's a love and hate technique. Some people love it. Some people hate it. But JC, I think that you just haven't gotten used to it yet. So have faith. I have faith in you. You will master the Dutch pour yet. So, all right. Morning from the UK. Hi. Thanks for joining us. Okay. Well, any other questions, feel free to type them in there. I'm going to write some stuff here on my piece of paper, and then I'll show you what I'm writing. So as far as all of these different techniques break down, I kind of break them into some separate categories, and I'll write them out here. So I have, first of all, the flip cup. And that is a very standard technique. It's used all the time. But then, underneath that technique, there are variations of the flip cup. So there's like a multiple flip cup. And there is a floating cup, which is one of my personal favorites. And then there's an open cup, which is not quite like the flip cup. It's more like a direct pour, but I kind of clump them together. And then we also have, what else do we have? So the flip cup, and then we also have, how was I going to write that? I forget. Well, I'll leave that there for now. So we have kind of like three things there with the flip cup. But then we have another one, which is the ring pour, which is one of the kind of core techniques, I think. The core techniques, in my opinion, are a direct pour, a flip cup, and a ring pour. So the ring pour, we have a lot of different variations of the ring pour. I will say a straight pour is pretty much the same thing. And then we have a multi-ring pour, and or that could be a multi-straight pour too, or we're having multiple ring pours on the same surface. Then we have the kiss pour, or I like to call that a double cup ring pour. Then we have a waterfall pour, which is one of my favorites, where you're holding the surface upright and then pouring down one side. And what else we got? And then we have a split cup, which is basically the kiss pour, only a little easier. So we have a split cup pour. And that's kind of all clumped under the ring pour. So those are, and then I have a direct pour, and I'll put that down here too. And direct pour, what do we have under that? So we have like a direct pour and a puddle pour is very similar to the direct pour. And then you can do that either like a dirty cup, like a dirty cup pour, or a clean pour, which is like a clean pour is when you're just using separate colors and pouring them separately onto the canvas. That's known as a clean pour. And then the dirty cup is, again, when you're mixing different colors in your cup and pouring that on. But you could do a combination of the two. That's similar to what I did when I did my direct pour demo. I did a clean pour. I was pouring individual colors on. And then I did a dirty cup pour, which is basically like you're pouring a ribbon. That is like a ribbon is a dirty cup pour. So, and then also under direct pour, with a different consistency, we're talking about the pearl pour. So the pearl pour, the pearl pour is actually a direct pour, just with a thinner consistency. So, and then Novala's got a great one, wandering ring pour, absolutely. And the straight pour is under there. So let's see, I'm going to check if there's any other questions. And yeah, the cloud pour, Naval, the cloud pour is a little bit different. Cloud pour would be under the ring pour. Actually, that's how I would do the cloud pour. And the cloud pour is a tricky technique and requires different consistency and different ingredients to get the cloud pour. But so let's see, I'm going to check and see if there's any other questions. Just throw your questions in there. I'm just kind of babbling and writing stuff down. So feel free to interrupt me at any time. JC says, this is a good one. Can you use titanium white or oxide black for cells? Well, that is what am I trying to say? Those two colors, typically by Amsterdam, are used in the cell activator in the bloom technique. So typically in the bloom, you have to create a mixture of paint called a cell activator, or CA for short. And the popular colors for that are titanium white and oxide black from Amsterdam paints, the standard series, mixed with the Australian Floetrol, which is expensive to get here in the US. But that is what creates the cells for the bloom. Those two colors by themselves do not generate cells. So you have to, they're part of the complicated bloom technique. So, but those colors and brands are thrown around a lot. There's a lot of confusion about CA, or the cell activator. People confuse those with different types of pours. So there is a lot of confusion about the bloom. And the bloom it's a beautiful technique. It's a tricky one to learn because there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of components. But when Shelley created that technique, she really blew the doors open of confusion and overwhelm by introducing all these other terms and all these terms and different ingredients and different paint brands and the Australian Floetrol and then the US Floetrol. So there's a lot of stuff happening with the bloom. So yeah, it is very confusing and kind of there's a lot of misinformation actually about it. So hopefully that answers your question. Now those two colors you can use them with like the Floetrol mix and they'll make cells just like the other paints do, like the Artist Loft Flow Acrylic that I use all the time. So, but I think what you're referring to is those particular colors with the Australian Floetrol in the bloom technique. Hope that answered your question and you understood that. All righty, let's see. Hey, Angela, thanks for stopping by. We got Donna in the house. Thanks for everyone for your comments and your questions. That's great. And then Angela says, the bloom and modified bloom, that is another category. Absolutely. I'm putting that one way down at the end here. The bloom. And then there's the modified bloom. There's the spinner bloom on the spinner. So spinner bloom. There is a bloom swipe. And there is called the deconstructed bloom, which was made, I think, invented by the wonderful waterfall acrylics. And that's a cool technique that she has. So there are a lot of different blooms happening. And there are also many different formulas or recipes for the bloom. So bloom is kind of a separate thing. At some point, I'll talk about the bloom in detail and hopefully straighten things out for you and me. Hopefully, it's still complicated. So let's see here. What else do we have? So in my little chart I've got, I'm going to put a line down here. And then I'm going to put a line here and here. So I'll show you kind of what I'm coming up with. Now, in the Dutch pour. So this is not by any means a complete chart. I'll just show you quickly and then I'll flip back. Let's see here. It's too big. It's too big. Let me get rid of this banner thing. All right, I need to zoom out, but I'll just move this. So here's kind of what I have so far. So over here, these are the core techniques, or the at least in my opinion, the 3 core techniques: the flip cup, the ring pour, and the direct pour. Now, under these 3, we've got all these different variations of the kind of the base technique. So in the flip cup, we've got the multiple flip cup, we've got a floating cup, we've got an open cup. We've also got the flip and drag. And then, so we've got multiple different types of flip cups. Over here on the ring pour, we've got a straight pour, in my opinion. These two are very similar. We've got the multi-ring pour. We've got like the kiss pour or the double cup ring pour, the waterfall pour. We've got a split cup pour, which is very similar to the kiss or the double cup pour. And then we have like a wandering ring pour. And then down here, I put a line because we have the cloud pour. And the cloud pour is a variation of the ring pour, but this is a different consistency. I should have put just different mix. And then we also have different ingredients in the cloud pour. So this is a little bit different, and this is more advanced as well, the cloud pour. Over here on the direct pour, we've got like a puddle pour. We've got a dirty cup pour, and a clean pour. I kind of talked about those. And then down here, we've got the pearl pour, which is also, different, just say different mix. And also an advanced technique. So maybe I'll put an A here. So advanced, these are advanced techniques. And also we require, like for the pearl pour, different ingredients. So then over here, so most of these things, aside from these two down here, which are, these two are different. All of these things up here, you can basically use the same paint consistency. So you could use pretty much the same exact mixture for all these different techniques up here. Now we move over here a little bit, and we've got the Dutch pour, which is kind of by itself. And this is a much thinner consistency. And then we've got all our blooms and all that trouble over here with the different bloom techniques. So, but this is a kind of a work in progress. This is not by any means a completed chart. And I actually have like way more techniques to put on here. I haven't talked about swipes yet. There's a bunch of other techniques in there. So, but I'm going to check if there are any other questions. Feel free to throw in any other question. I'm just checking here while I was away. And hey, Tammy and Joey. Hey, how are you doing? And okay, I don't see any other questions. And Navala says right here, Artist Loft Soft White and 1 to 5 American Floetrol is a great cell activator. Yes, you can also use the American Floetrol as a cell activator. You can also use a few other things as cell activators. I'll talk about those some other time. But yeah, so there are many different ways to create like the bloom results, like the results you want to get with the bloom. So, it's kind of been pulled apart and put together in many different ways. And so there's no real, there's Shelley's way, which is the original way, which is a beautiful way, and she gets amazing results. And a lot of other people do too. But it's been modified and tweaked and changed, just like everything else. So, so there's no one way, again, to do any of these things, really. But thanks for that, Navala. That's great info. So, but so anyway, if there's any other questions, please feel free to throw them in there. And I've got more techniques to put on my chart, but I don't want to bore you with just writing all this stuff down. And let's see if there's any other things on here. But I totally forgot about like the Gadget pours. I call it I'll write that down. So this is these are kind of combinations of different types of pours, but I just call them a Gadget pour. And a Gadget pour is anything where you're using kind of a different type of tool to create the pour. So certain kind of Gadget pours, like the string pull and the chain pull, those are Gadget pours. And the dustpan is Gadget pour. The funnel pour. And let's see what else. Like the bottle bottom. Is a Gadget, and then the colander pour or strainer pours. Colander pour. And like injection, there's injection pours. Those are also, I refer to those as Gadget pours. But injection pour is kind of you can do that to any pour really. You're just kind of infusing paint in the paint puddle, which is a really cool technique. And then marbles, JC says marbles. Marble is a Gadget pour, like a marble. Marble pour. Absolutely. And the marble pour could actually go under the direct pour as well, because it's kind of like a puddle pour with a marble. So, but that's kind of, the gadget pours are all kind of based off of a different type of pour anyway. And then Donna asked an interesting question. Let's see. So Donna says, where would you put the reverse flower dip? The reverse flower dip, I'd probably classify that under like a direct pour. Because basically what you're doing is kind of, you're putting your paints, and there's also multiple ways to do it. This is just the way I'm familiar with. But so you're putting colors down on your canvas. It's also kind of, you could do it with like a strainer too, or bottle bottom. So it's kind of like a direct pour, I guess. But then you're removing that, and then you put your like a sheet of cling wrap or something on it, and then pull that up. And then you have this kind of beautiful, it's a reverse dip pour. So yeah, it could fit in a couple different places. I'd probably put it under like a gadget pour. It's definitely a gadget pour. So that's probably where it fits best. And hey, Casey. Yeah, the gadget pour. Thanks. Nice to see you, Casey. Thanks for joining us. My friend Casey. He's a great artist as well. And so we got a couple more questions. And what paint? Joshua says, what paint should you use? That's a big question, Joshua. There are many types of paint. I'll give you a quick rundown of my favorite types of paint. I'll show you a couple examples. Any type of acrylic paint will work for you. I'll show you the types I like the best and use probably the most. Let me grab a couple off my wall here. These are all going to be blues because I'm closest to the blues. What else do I got? And purple. Okay. So these types of paints in the tubes. So these tube paints, like about a 4-ounce tube. These are probably my favorite types of paints to use. Artist Loft is a great one. I use this all the time. Master's Touch. I use this one all the time. You can find these at Michael's. The Artist Loft is at Michael's. Master's Touch is at Hobby Lobby. Both of them, both of those stores carry Liquitex Basics. This is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite paint. I use this more than anything else probably, but these types of paints work really well. They're pretty affordable. You can often find Artist Loft and Master's Touch on sale. So if they're on sale, you can kind of stock up. But those three, I'd say, you can't miss with those. Those are great paints to use. There's many other brands and consistencies of paint, but maybe those three are what I'd probably recommend starting with. Hope that helps. So let's see. So Donna says, regarding the reverse flower dip, she puts her colors on the plastic and then dips your canvas into that. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. You could also do that just on like freezer paper too. But then you can, so what we're talking about here is you have a piece of thin plastic. You put your paints on the plastic, and then you take your canvas and then dip it into the paint. Then you could flip it over, and then you kind of grab the edges of the plastic and pull it up, and it creates a beautiful kind of flower-like effect. And there's also multiple ways to do that. You could do a bottle bottom pour and then pour the paints on your canvas, pull the bottle bottom off, lay the plastic down on your canvas, pull those up. It creates a similar effect. So there's multiple ways to do kind of that kind of reverse flower dip. It's a very fun, pretty technique. Thanks for sharing that, Donna. That's awesome. And JC said the reverse dip is hard too. It's tricky. It's not like a piece of cake technique. None of them really are. They all take a little bit of practice, but yeah, that's a fun one. I like the reverse dip. And Naval asks, how did I do the one directly behind me? This one here, the white painting, this is one of my favorites. This is a floating cup pour. And I got lots of cells in this painting. Floating cup is kind of probably my favorite technique. So it's basically a flip cup, only you release the air out of the cup and it kind of floats around the canvas. That one has, I think, 3 or 4 colors. There's Payne's Gray, there's Silver, there's the Artist Loft Flow Acrylic White, and then there's also Metallic White, which is responsible for a lot of these big cells in that particular painting. And I think I had some gold in there, like a light champagne colored gold. So that's a fun one. That's the floating cup technique. And then Joshua asks, how much do they cost? These types of paints, the Artist Loft and the Master's Touch, these are about $4.50, about $4, something like that. The Liquitex Basics is a little more expensive. This is about $5, $5.50, I think, something around there. But if you can get them on sale, they're, you can kind of stock up. Also, you don't use like all of this paint in one painting. So typically, if you're working on a relatively smaller size, 8 by 10, 11 by 14, like a tube of this will last you for maybe 2 or 3 paintings with maybe 3 or 4 colors. So you can get several paintings out of the tubes. And we're also mixing these with the Floetrol and a little bit of water. So you can kind of, that extends the paint out more. So we get greater volume. So let's see here. I love the little question marks before you ask the question. That's awesome. Thanks for doing that. It lets me know there's a question there. And let's see. So Donna likes the negative space in the painting behind me. Yeah, it's a very subtle painting. There's not tons of contrast. But yeah, there's not really a ton of negative space. It looks like it on the camera, but because there's very subtle color shifts and a lot of like subtle cells, but it's a cool painting. I like that one. Thank you, Donna. Then we ask Facebook user, do you need to put a base coat on all techniques? You do not have to. It really depends on your personal preference and the technique. I typically do. Some techniques require one more than others. If you're just doing a flip cup, standard flip cup, you really don't need a base coat. I like to have a thin base coat just because it helps move the paint around when you're tilting it and stretching the paint out. I find a base coat is helpful, but it's not absolutely necessary. Now, things that you have to have a base coat for, like the floating cup in particular, you need a base coat because we're basically doing a flip cup in a puddle of paint. And that puddle of paint, the paint is kind of seeping into that puddle before we tilt and stretch it. So that technique, you would need a base coat. Similar with the open cup, it's basically the same thing as the floating cup. Only we're not flipping the cup, we're kind of adding the colors one at a time into an open cup. That's the bottom is cut out and sitting in the puddle of paint on our canvas. I'm trying to think if there's the other one where you absolutely have to have a puddle is the bloom, but here we're going to get confused again. They call that a pillow. Instead of a base coat, it's called a pillow because it's a pretty substantial thickness of paint. And that has to do with the bloom technique because we're going to be blowing into that. And you need that kind of thickness of paint so you don't blow all the way down to the canvas because then the paint gets stuck. So, but again, you're like, what are you talking about with a pillow? So base coat, in my opinion, is separate than a pillow. Base coats are in general spread over the whole canvas. They don't have to be, but they're usually a little bit thinner than the pillow. Another thing that is popular to do is just to pour pour a puddle of paint in your canvas, tilt it around a little bit, and then do your pour on that, like a ring pour or a straight pour into that puddle. That's a very popular way to do it too. Instead of spreading a base coat over your whole canvas, you can do it kind of that way. So hopefully that answered your question. And then typically, the only other thing I could think of right off the top of my head, which is a little bit different than I think what you're asking, is a swipe. Like in a swipe, we need the whole canvas covered, not really with a base coat, but with all our different colors. And then we swipe over that whole field of color to get our cells. So hopefully that answered your question. And then that's a good question, though. Let's see, another question came in. What do you think about house paint? I don't love house paint. I use it. I've tried it. But I think, to be honest, I think the house paint is a lower quality of paint than our paints we're using typically, like the Master's Touch, Liquitex Basics, even the Artist Loft. These are higher quality types of paint. They have more acrylic binder in them. House paint does not have a lot of, the colors in there do not have a lot of tinting strength. They use kind of cheaper pigments. I mean, remember, house paint is to cover a massive area on your wall for cheap, for not a lot of money. And also, when these types of paints dry, especially like the Liquitex and the more professional grade acrylics, they have a lot more acrylic binder in there. They're more flexible. So they will move around with the canvas, whereas house paint will not. It will be more brittle when it dries. So I don't love house paint. And I try not to use it if I can get away from it. The exception would be if I have to use like the satin enamel house paint, like the bare satin enamel, to get things like the cloud effect. In that case, you can use the house paint, but we're also adding things to it, like a little bit of maybe Liquitex pouring medium. That'll help the brittleness of the house paint when it dries. So, but with the bloom technique, that uses a lot of house paint, which is one of the reasons I don't love Shelley's original mixture for it, because those paintings, the longevity of them, I don't know. But of course, she's also pouring those on harder substrates, like panels, tiles, things like that. So they're not going to be as flexible as like a canvas. So you got to keep these things in mind when you're picking your materials. But if I was to do all these other techniques aside from the bloom, and aside from using the satin enamel for the cloud technique, I try to stay away from house paint whenever possible. I don't recommend it for like base coats and things like that. I just don't think it's a high enough quality paint to be using for our art. So hopefully that answers your question. And of course, that's my opinion. There are many other people that have different opinions on that one, because I know house paint is used extensively. But that's just my 2 cents. And okay, let's see. So Jobo has a big long comment or question. Hi, Brad and everyone. Or for reverse dip, you can put paint direct onto canvas, then put a second canvas straight on top of first. Yeah, that's and gently press down. That's another type of direct pour. That's a great comment, Jobo. Thanks for putting that in there. That's also, I refer to that as like a mirror technique, because you'll basically get 2 identical paintings if you do a reverse dip or a dip painting that way. And what he's talking about is if you take a canvas and you put your paints on the canvas, take another canvas the same size, put it on there, and then kind of gently push it around on the canvas, pull them apart. You kind of have a mirror image. So it's also kind of like called a monoprint technique. You're kind of creating a print, a single print from your canvas, which is a fun, kind of cool technique to do. So, I mean, there's so many different techniques that are fun and exciting to do out there. So let's see, any other questions? Oh, here's a tip for everybody that is from Genevieve. She says that Liquitex is on sale at Jerry's Artorama, which is an online retailer, for $4.58. That's awesome. They also have some physical stores if you're in the East Coast. Thanks for the tip, Genevieve. That's fantastic. See. Here is JC has a question. Oops, that's not the right one. Where did it go? JC says hers don't mirror each other. Well, it all depends. It's in the eye of the beholder, JC. Let's see. Oh, Jobo says, is it better to use a heat gun or a torch? It depends on what you're using it for. I have both of them. If you want to just pop some air bubbles, a torch works great. I prefer that over a heat gun. The heat gun takes a little bit of time to kind of heat up, and then you have to, you can pop the air bubbles, but then you have this hot gun that you have to put somewhere. So I prefer a torch in general, just a small butane torch, kind of like this one. This is kind of what I prefer. It's a very simple torch, very inexpensive. I think these are my favorite ones. It's incredibly easy to operate it. It just has a trigger here. So that's what I like to use. I prefer a torch probably to a heat gun, but it really depends on what you're using it for. If it's just to pop bubbles, that's what I like to do best. But a heat gun is great for when you're using resin, which is a different type of thing. Okay. So here's a good question. Sumaya, I hope I said that right, Sumaya. Hopefully I pronounced that right. How can I get the cloud effect without using satin enamel? And everyone wants to know the answer to that question. It's very difficult, and there really is no other way. And I've found, I've experimented with many different things. I'm trying one other new thing now, which is kind of hit or miss for me. So I'm not going to talk about it until I better understand it. But satin enamel seems to be really the only type of paint to create these amazing cloudy effects. You can get close with the DecoArt 24 karat gold. That will create like a cloudy looking effect that's very similar to the satin enamel. That's probably the closest that I found. But to get that, to reproduce that amazing satin enamel cloud effect, I haven't found a replacement yet. So, but 24K gold, also the Amsterdam golds. Let's see if I can grab one here. The Amsterdam standard series gold, like the light gold and the deep gold, these create an effect that's quite similar to the 24 karat gold. Not quite as powerful, but you can get some really nice cloudy cell effects from this gold paint too. But as far as the white goes, I haven't found a replacement yet for that. And that's a problem because it's very hard to find that satin enamel paint. So, well, I don't see any other questions at the moment. Here's one. Can you put varnish over painting with silicone in the paint? Sure you can. You just have to wash the painting first. Wait till it's totally dry. Let it sit there maybe a couple weeks. Wash it off with some Dawn detergent and do that a couple times. And you should get all the silicone off, and then you'll be able to varnish your painting. It's done. I've done that several times. Other people have done that many times. The trickiest thing is if you want to resin your painting, that you really, really have to get rid of the silicone. And in that case, I would recommend using an isolation coat. So wash all the silicone off, like I mentioned, then brush on an isolation coat, which is a thin, clear coat of like a acrylic polymer. Golden makes one that's really, really good. And then once you put that on, now you can pour the resin on top of your canvas, and you most likely, hopefully, will not get any pitting or problems. So that's how you would do that with the silicone. So, all right. Well, we talked about all kinds of things tonight, so that was pretty good. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but thank you all for joining me and asking some great questions. This was really fun. We talked about some different techniques and where they kind of fall and why the bloom is so complicated. And we talked about some reverse dips, which is a fun technique. I really hadn't talked about that one before. So, but I hope you have hope you have a good evening. And thanks so much for joining me. This was a fun one. And oh, here's another question right under the wire by Jobo. She asked, or they asked, I'm not sure if it's a he or she, but do you have a particular place where you dry your finished wet paintings? And yes, I do. I have a baker's cart, which holds about 20 racks. I have like large plastic racks that fit into my baker's cart. So I can dry about 20 paintings at a time. That's a lot of paintings, by the way. And they will also, I can fit multiple smaller paintings on that, on these large racks. That costs about, it depends on where you find it, like $100 to $150 to get that kind of cart. Then you have to buy all the trays. So that's a kind of a serious drying rack. And there are many other types of drying racks out there. A simple solution is just to get some cake boxes. You can get them at Walmart. I think Wilton makes them. Michaels has them. And you just put these cake boxes together and it'll hold a 12 by 16 painting. Then you could set your painting, your wet painting in the box, the bottom of the box, and then set that somewhere to dry. You could also stack another box on top of that one, just turn the other way. So you can kind of make your own drying rack out of the cake boxes. And that's an affordable way to do it. And I've done it that way for quite a while, dried a lot of paintings in cake boxes. So hope that helps. But yeah, drying is always kind of an issue. We have all these wet paintings everywhere. You need a lot of room kind of to dry them. So, well, thanks again, everyone. Let's see. I don't see any other questions. And, but thank you so much for joining me. I love talking to you and chatting with you about all these paint pouring things and answering your questions and talking about different techniques and tips and tricks. I really enjoy it. So hope you enjoy it as well. So I will see you on Friday where we're going to do some swipes. I'm going to do some swipe demos. So that should be a lot of fun and I hope you can join me. So I will talk to you again very soon and hope you have a great rest of the week. See you Friday and thanks so much for watching and commenting. So I'll